Joeyd,
That guy,
Joeyd,
that guy,
Joeyd,
that guy.
Joey D.
What's up, YouTube? It's that guy, Joey D, and welcome to the place to be. So, in today's episode of Being Black and Bipolar, I just want to talk with you about how I dealt with anger and frustration when it came to learning, as well as dealing with my mental health. So, let's just get straight to it. So, I want to start off by talking about what caused me a lot of anger and frustration. So, initially, what caused me a lot of anger and frustration goes all the way back to 2012, back when I was living in Washington, D.C., because I was attending Howard University at the time. And a lot of my anger and frustration came after my grandfather passed away 2 months before the end of the semester, as well as 2 months before I was first hospitalized. And if you want to know more about my hospitalizations, my last video talks about it more in depth. But this one, we're just going to focus on, the anger and frustration that came from losing a grandparent, as well as the anger and frustration that came from being hospitalized after all of that happened. So I had a lot of built up frustration from initially, losing my grandfather and then being hospitalized and then learning about a mental illness and, I may be crazy or, what's wrong with me, having all these initial questions. I was just angry a lot of the time. And that's initially what led me into getting into some legal troubles. So having all that built up lasted with me for some years. Even though I walked around with a smile, even though I was having fun, I was, trying to do stand-up comedy and a lot of things. That anger and frustration followed me throughout the years because I never really dealt with it. And also in 2018, my grandmother passed away, as well as some of my friends that I've known since I was a kid. So that initially built up a lot of anger and frustration. And as you can see that I don't really deal with death well, or people moving on, because that just initially just brings to me a lot of questions of like what I could have done, or I should have been there. I should have said this before, they left. But that was just, my initial causes of what brought me anger and frustration. So moving on to the second point under what caused me a lot of anger and frustration, I would say not being able to express myself. You see, there were plenty of times, dealing with a lot of manic episodes, I didn't have the right words to say. I didn't trust that when I spoke up, the people, my friends and family, doctors, therapists, they would understand what I was saying because it was coming out of a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. I still wasn't, able to deal with the passing of my friends and my grandparents. And I wasn't able to understand half of the time why I was even hospitalized. So a lot of anger and frustration was just built up. Even though I walked around with a smile and, I tried my best to, present myself that I'm doing okay, I was walking around with a chip on my shoulder. I was just angry and no one really knew it because, I'm a happy guy for the most part. So what that led me to was how I dealt with my anger and frustration. And that's going to be my next point that I'm talking about. So how I initially dealt with some of my anger and frustration initially was just smoking a lot of weed, drinking a lot of drink, and partying excessively. And I mean all day, every day, by myself, in the gym. Can't nobody stop me, and I mean it. So initially, that was my way of dealing with my anger and frustration, was simply just to get high, simply just forget about everything because I didn't want to think about the passing of my grandparents. And I definitely didn't want to think about any of the times that I was hospitalized. So that was really how I dealt with my anger and frustration in the beginning stages. And sometimes even recently, that's how I would say I dealt with things. But over time, and having that self-realization, I had to learn that this was an unhealthy way for me to deal with my anger and frustration. So I had to graduate to something that my father mentioned to me, which was going to the gym every day. So that's something that helps me now deal with my anger and frustration, just go lift some weights, burn off some steam and, feel better when I'm done because I'm building myself up, building confidence and doing something that will help me eventually in the long run. As well as my second point on dealing with how I do it now is talking with my support system. I have a good group of friends, family, and a therapist that I'm able to comfortably express myself now. So talking with them about, some of my anger and frustrations, getting the positive feedback that I need, that's what's helped me to continue to grow and become a better person. As well as, the final thing that, I would say is how I deal with my anger and frustration now is going to the beach, because I live in California, and that is something that keeps me relaxed. It keeps me at my mind at ease, and I'm able to reflect on the good times that I've had with, my grandparents, or the good times that did come from the hospitalizations, and the good times of the support system that I do have around me that helps me continue to grow and be a better person each day. So there you have it. That's how I would say I've dealt with my anger and frustration being black and bipolar. And if you've enjoyed this video, do me a favor, like, subscribe. And if you have any feedback or any other questions, leave it in the comment section or follow me over on my Instagram. But other than that, we're just going to keep this thing going and rolling. One day at a time until the end of time. Peace be the journey.
That guy. Joey D. That guy. Joey D. That guy. Joey D. That guy. Joey D.